Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. Happy New Year. 3 things you will learn from episode 132. Number 1, why it's so important to listen to your gut. Number 2, how to navigate when you've made bad decisions. And number 3, why your greatest struggle can teach you the biggest lessons and how to rise through it. Rashmi Airan is an Ivy League educated recovering lawyer, Wall Street investment banker, serial entrepreneur, college professor, professionally trained vocalist, and a globally recognized transformation expert. She is also an internationally recognized speaker, consultant, and catalyst for transformation with a mission to foster authentic organizational cultures, something you know we love here. Rashmi excelled as a lawyer, graduating with honors from Columbia Law School, and after gaining experience at major corporations, she embarked on an independent law practice in Miami. During the housing boom, she developed an ethical blind spot, collaborating with a real estate developer engaged in questionable practices, and we are going to unpack that. Her powerful story transcends the pitfalls of making a life-altering decision. It's the tale of leadership, core values, and decision-making capable of creating a safe haven for courageous and often challenging conversations. Rashmi, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here. Thank you, Lyndsay. Excited.
I am so happy you're here. You have such an incredible story. So that's where I always like to start. So would you share your story or a little bit of it, and we can unpack it along the way?
Sure. Thank you. So I would say that I grew up in Miami, Florida, with parents of Indian descent who immigrated like in 1970. And by all accounts, I was always trying to be the perfect kid, which is, I think, no stranger to many of us, whether we come from a cultural, a culture that excels in that or pushes that, or our families, or just that's who we are. So I would say, like, I laugh with my kids and tell them, like, okay, I'm 53, and to date, I have never smoked a cigarette. I have never tried a drug. Like, I was always trying to do the right thing and be the good girl.
Mhm.
And to me, success was defined by my achievements. All of my self-worth, my self-love, my self-esteem, everything was rooted in doing all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, which meant getting the good grades, going to the best schools, winning all the awards, and eventually making a lot of money. And so I was on that path. I went to UNC Chapel Hill for undergrad and excelled and got inducted into all the honorary societies and won all the awards. And then I went on and worked for 2 years on Wall Street in investment banking. And then from there, I went to law school at Columbia Law School. Again, I also graduated top of my class and inducted into the top societies. And I only say that because as I go through my story, hopefully your listeners will understand I'm not trying to brag. It's just
Yeah.
part of the journey. I, by way of San Francisco, ended up back in Miami and started my own practice after working at it for a few law firms. And eventually what happened was I had a client that was a real estate developer. And so if you take yourselves back to 2007 and 8, right in the housing boom, I was a solo practitioner. My kids were 2 and 3. My husband at the time was a firefighter, so I was a major breadwinner of the family. And I felt this desire, like, oh, if I can get a big client, that would give me financial stability, which would give me more time with my kids. And I eventually got an opportunity to meet a real estate developer in late 2007. And it didn't even cross my mind that I should ask certain questions because I was just so focused on that goal of getting a client, getting this big client, and having that financial stability. So to make a very long story short, I basically ended up working with this client without doing any due diligence, without asking the hard questions, without listening to my gut. And really, I was silencing my inner voice. And within 15 months, I did about 200 real estate transactions for this. He was a real estate developer. And then stopped working with him, merged my practice with my father's, who's also an attorney. Mm-hmm. Was not really doing transactional work, was doing more litigation, real estate litigation. I grew my practice by 1,200%. And, I was thriving. And then all of a sudden, the FBI visited me. And in May 2011, 2 agents showed up. And here's the thing, like, nobody tells you, because hopefully this is never going to happen to you, but I didn't learn even in law school that if the FBI comes to my door, I can like ask them, hey, can I take your card and
Call you back.
back with an attorney? Because like, human nature tells you
Well,
if
and
you have
you're a
somebody
rule
to your
follower
door,
to begin with.
I am
So you're
exactly.
you're intimidated and you're going to listen to these very official people at your door
And
and
they operate off that fear. Like they know that we're
totally.
scared. And so it didn't even occur to me that I didn't have to talk to them. So instead, what I did was I invited them into my office. I had this like circular table near my desk. They sat with me. They interviewed me and interrogated me for 4 hours.
Oh,
Mind you, I don't even have an attorney sitting with me. I'm alone with two FBI agents, not recognizing or realizing what I was getting myself into. And they were asking me questions about documents, emails, people that I may or may not have met 4 years earlier.
yeah.
And I was answering these questions, yes, no, as if I could remember. Of course, none of us have that kind of memory.
Mm-mm.
When they left, I thought, okay, well, they just wanted to interview me. I'm the records custodian. I'm the attorney with all the files, but they're not after me. Like, I haven't done anything wrong. My files have already passed audit. Like, my escrows are perfect. And so I went on my way and I kept working on my practice, raising my children. And 2 years later, I got a grand jury subpoena for documents. So to give you context, it was 6 years after I met the developer that I got the grand jury
Jeez.
subpoena. And again, I'm still operating with this understanding and pretense. I haven't done anything. I am just going to give them all my records. So they wanted all my closing files. So I submitted all my closing files. Basically, within 3 months, my attorney called me into his office and said, you're a target, which I also didn't know what that meant
Mm.
because I'm not a criminal lawyer. I didn't understand that the government was coming after
But you
me.
knew it didn't sound good.
It didn't. I literally collapsed. My attorney used to have he had a couch in his office. I collapsed and was hysterical,
Yeah.
like shaking uncontrollably because this was my whole life.
Yeah.
And all I could think about was that I was just raising my parents and my kids and my family and my community. So I sat on a lot of boards in Miami, and I was so like wrought with fear that
Of
what's
course.
going to happen to these nonprofits that I've been serving to help, and now will they be affected? Um, and for a long time, I avoided. I tried to. I was so I was just so convinced I hadn't done anything that I kept trying to convince my attorney to convince the prosecutor not to indict me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I got indicted and I was going to fight it and go to trial. So in April 2014, I got indicted for bank fraud and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. And then I spent 4 months going through all of my discovery. So like 200,000 pages of documents and
Oh,
15,000 emails. And I basically dissected all of it. I went through every single page because I was so convinced I'm going to prove that I'm innocent. And I would meet with my attorney periodically and we would go through the evidence. And in August, so like 4 months after I got indicted, he said, Rashmi, can you come in with your parents? So we walk in expecting to talk about trial and
yeah.
exhibits and strategy and expert witnesses and my testimony and all of it. And instead, he and his partner, his name's David, his partner Margot, they gave my parents and I a presentation and they said, okay, Rashmi, if you go to trial, this is what the government has to prove. And this is the evidence they're going to use in their case. Then we're going to stand up and give our defense. And this is the evidence we're going to use in our case. And then the government's going to stand up and give their rebuttal. And there was one particular piece of evidence that happened, like it was an email I forwarded on Christmas Eve.
Sure.
And I never opened the attachment. I just like happened to forward an email while I was making my kids sleep on Christmas Eve. Didn't pay attention, didn't really think it was that important. And I was like, oh, somebody in my office will tell me if there's something. And that one email was one of the main pieces of evidence, and it was the rebuttal piece. So it was in that meeting that the attorney said to me, and I've known him 20 years, like we're friends. And David said, Rashmi, if you want me to go to trial, we'll go to trial and we'll fight as hard as we can. But I'm telling you right now, you're going to lose. And you're looking at 20 years in federal prison. And I know you didn't walk into this planning a crime. But here's the thing. You knew enough. And as an attorney, you had a fiduciary duty to ask the questions you didn't ask.
Yeah.
And not doing something is still doing something wrong.
So what happened?
So I eventually pled guilty.
Mm.
And then I got sentenced to a year and a day in prison.
Better than 20, but still awful.
Better than 20. I left my kids. I ended up serving about 6 months because there was another case that they asked me to testify in that I testified in. I came home early. And since then, I have really deconstructed what went wrong.
Mm.
And I've redefined what success means to me. So it used to be defined by all those accolades. And now
Yeah.
success to me is, can I touch and inspire one person today? And if I do that, my self-worth, everything lies now in how I inspire and help people through my life experiences.
Well, I love that you brought that up because I think it's easy to have a definition of success that is financial and accolades. And I think it wasn't until I became an entrepreneur that success looked different to me. It was accomplishments. It was how many people have I helped? What kinds of messaging am I putting out into the world? Who am I inspiring? And so your definition of success is much more elastic and less, you know, do a good job, get good grades, get a good, make a lot of money, take care of your family. Those are all important things. But it's so much bigger than that. And sorry you had to go through such a rotten journey to discover it. But now you're in a position where you're speaking and you're telling your story and you're helping others. So let's talk a little bit about what are you trying to inspire in people? I mean, this is a heart-wrenching story.
Yeah.
So what's your main message that you like to give?
So it's interesting. My main message has evolved, and I think it's just part of the journey for most of us and many
Yeah,
of
all of us
us.
do. Yeah,
What I realized when I started out speaking, I started actually more in the ethics and compliance space. It was a natural place for me to fall,
of
and I
course.
began to deconstruct like why and how did I make these bad decisions? What were my blind spots that never even I didn't even know what a blind spot was. It's not like
Sure.
unless you're actually paying attention to people like me or
Well,
others
and
that are
you're a
talking
rule
about.
follower, so it's not
Yes.
like you were trying to be insidious or, you know,
Yeah.
deceitful. That's not who you are. So it didn't occur to you.
To even think about like what
No.
else is like, what am I not thinking about? What am I not looking at? So I started talking a lot about like kind of doing the right thing, making ethical decisions, and the mental discipline of what that looks like and what those cognitive biases are that trap us. And so I did a lot of work around that. But what kept happening at every speech, and I still do that work if people want me to, but what kept happening after every one of those talks is the audience would ask me, but how can you stand up there with strength and share your story? Like, where do you get that resilience from? Like,
Yeah.
what is that process? So over the last, like I would say 2 years, I really began to recognize and deconstruct actually what I've been doing for 30 years. I just never put a name to it or process to it. And it comes from watching my grandparents and watching my parents go through their own life experiences and understanding that no matter what we go through, because the truth is, the universal truth for all of us is we will all go through struggle.
Of
It
course.
is not, we can't avoid it. It is the definition of humanity that we will
100%.
all face something at some point. Some of us deal with, medical, tragic life issues
Yeah.
uh, early in life or later in life, or watch our family members go through that. Some of us will go through marital issues, which I have also gone through because I'm also
Hmm.
divorced. Or we'll watch, family friends go through something that maybe they lose all their finances. So my
Yeah.
parents ended up losing everything in 1989 and filing bankruptcy. So I watched my parents
Mm.
came with $8 in their pocket from India, make it. We lived in the most prestigious neighborhood in Miami and the best house on the ocean.
Mm.
And then in 1989, lose all of it
Mm.
because of the crisis, the real estate crash then, and then file bankruptcy and lose their home to foreclosure. So many of us will deal with financial crisis. In my case, I've dealt with marital, legal, and
All of
financial.
it. Yeah.
The thing is like we all go through these moments. And so what happens, right? There's this fear of uncertainty. There's the anxiety of what's going to come next. There's like this desperation of how am I going to come back from this?
Yeah.
What's going to happen to my reputation? What's going to happen to my kids? So I dealt with all of it. And what I recognized is the first step for me was I had to embrace what was happening. I just had to acknowledge the truth
Yeah.
and accept it, which basically looks like you have to look that dragon in the eye and understand that it is what it is, it's happening. I'm going to
It
accept it.
happened. Yeah.
I'm going to embrace the pain that I'm feeling because we can't avoid our pain.
No.
The pain is there and it's valid. Once you can embrace the pain and accept it, then you let go of it. So
Yeah.
what I'd say is the
You
next
got to
step is,
process it. Yeah.
yeah. So by the process of embracing and then letting go, and there's a lot of things we all need to let go of. And I think, what I say is this process, I call it the rise process. We're dealing with this every single day. It's an iterative, never ending, evolving process because there's
Totally.
always something that's going to come up in our lives as a struggle or a change or a fear or a challenge.
Totally.
And when we let go, I had to let go of my ego, which
Yeah.
was really hard,
Well, you
right?
were
So
living such a connected public life. You were
yes,
connected to so many organizations and you were touching so many people throughout all of your different areas of work. I'm really curious, how did you deal with the shame? Because, that had to be a real emotion and something that I would think would be hard for anybody. So, how did you navigate through that?
shame is one of these. Well, okay. I will start by telling you that Brene Brown is my hero.
Yeah.
When I was in prison, the first book I read was The Gift of Imperfection that
Mm.
one of my friends sent to me. And, uh, I was in prison, so I couldn't watch her TED Talks. I didn't even know who she was prior to that.
Mm.
When I came out, of course, I like indulged and watched
Yeah.
everything I could
Show
about
me
her.
everything.
Yeah. But her research on shame and recognizing that it is something that when we walk through shame, which is my entire thing of we have to rise through we have to go through it,
Yeah.
right? By me going through the shame, feeling all of what that looked like for me, the embarrassment,
Yeah.
the shame, the like wanting to hide myself from people initially, by embracing it and walking through the shame and really finding the ability to find the strength through vulnerability. And I know people talk a lot about vulnerability. Of course, Brene has given us all
Sure.
the voice to talk about it in such a way, but I live it every single day. And I know there's others that do this, but my kids laugh at me because, and almost roll their eyes sometimes because I am so open about this experience. There are lots of women that I was in prison with that had not even told their kids that they were in prison, right? Like they were lying to their children. I take the opposite approach. I believe when we're vulnerable and own up to whatever it is, even to our children,
Yeah.
they will also learn those lessons.
Agreed.
And the ego and shame are so intertwined, right?
Yeah.
Like if we can learn to have self compassion and forgiveness of ourselves. And
Mm.
as women, it's really hard, right? As women, we're almost told that we have to quiet ourselves,
Yeah.
that we can't talk about the shame. And I don't know why, but men are not prone to feeling shame as much as women. I'm not making a generalization,
I
but
would agree with that.
I think
I
in
would agree.
general, women tend to be shamed more.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I know that there are men on the circuit, on the speaking circuit, who have gone through similar experiences as me, who don't talk about it in the same way.
Yeah.
Because they talk sort of like about the facts and about what happened. But to me, when you're going through what I went through, um, the hardest part is the shame. The
Yeah.
hardest part is what is going to happen to my kids that I'm leaving behind?
That's right.
What's going to happen to my reputation? Like that's real stuff. I lost my bar license. Like I lost all my money, right? So the shame and the ego, when we can learn to actually have our self-compassion to let go of it, then it also helps us let go of the fears. That's
Yeah.
spot, like the fear of the unknown, the fear of what's next, the fear of how am I going to come out of it.
Yeah. I mean,
I also had to, sorry,
there are so many people listening that have made decisions that have had a negative ripple effect in their life. And some do what you do and they embrace it and they talk about it. And then there are others who push, they
avoid it.
go avoid it, they go over it, they go around it, they don't want to live through that pain. And I think the fact that you did and the fact that you went through it and processed it makes you so much healthier today. But what advice do you give for people that have made some really bad decisions and have to live with them?
Well, the first thing I'd say is you have to learn to forgive yourself. I think it's so easy for us to pass judgment on ourselves. And I did that a
Yeah.
lot. Uh, I I continue to have, but I really have always had these very high expectations of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when this happened in my life, I had to get to the point where I could look at myself in the mirror and say, I forgive you, like to myself, because I was so wrought with this emotion of how did I let this happen?
Yeah.
I'm like the little Indian girl with pigtails that was always doing the right thing. How am I the one going to prison? How did this happen? How did I let myself make these really bad decisions? Right. So when I finally forgave myself, I stopped passing judgment on myself.
Mm.
And that I had to let go of that because it was really holding me back. I also had to forgive others. So in my case, the client that I was working with didn't even get indicted. And, there's a lot we can unpack there.
Oh,
But I was so angry about it for so long. And it began to give me an ulcer, right? It was really beginning to affect me in a really negative way. And I finally forgave him spiritually
yeah.
and I let it go. Because what I understand is that I believe spiritually that what's meant for me will always be there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for the good and the bad,
Yeah.
right? So, and what's meant for him is meant for
On
him.
his own. Yep. He'll have.
Yeah, and in this, I guess he's not meant to go and learn this prison experience and have this prison experience and learn that lesson. Hopefully, he will learn it in some other way.
He will.
And so that was like for me one of the biggest steps I took. And once I did that, the other thing that I did was I took accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to pretend and have this aura around us that everything is hunky dory, perfect,
Yeah.
beautiful, but life is not that. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm very involved in my community and I sit on all these boards, which also means I know all the politicians because I've been involved politically. I know all the managing partners of all the law firms, and I just have a ton of friends. I'm very involved in our community. And so I was very intentional. I didn't know if there'd be a press release. I definitely did not want people to gossip and talk about me. So I intentionally I'm a nerd. Like I made a spreadsheet of all the people in my life. And I remember it was January 2015. It was right after I pled, before I got sentenced. I started calling people, like literally picked up the phone
Mm-hmm.
and called almost 200 people. And I told them what I did. And I asked for forgiveness. And then I asked for help.
Yeah.
And so I will say that before I started making these calls, I actually had convinced myself that everyone would hang up on me,
Yep.
that everyone would shun me,
Yep.
and I would lose all my friends. And what happened was magical. I understood and learned that people are very forgiving of our humanity
They are.
if we allow them the opportunity
Yeah.
to step into that. And so on every call, I was bawling hysterically. People were shocked because I'm like the last person people would have
Of
expected
course.
to go to prison or
Sobering
to
for
maybe go to
everyone.
prison.
Yeah.
And at that point, I didn't even know what my sentence would be. I didn't know what would happen. I just knew that I needed people to hear it from me.
Yeah.
And on every call, people gave me affirmations of their unconditional love. And actually, I can show you that I got almost 200 letters of support. Those 200 people wrote letters to the judge, and every
Amazing.
single person shared stories of how I had inspired them and affected them and touched them in some way. And we're talking, some of these people were like 12 when I met them. So
Yeah.
shared stories of like how in high school I did something and it's, influenced them or inspired them
What a
that I didn't
beautiful
remember.
gift. What a beautiful
So
gift.
I think it's so easy. We convince ourselves and social media is horrible about
Yep.
this, right? Like we convince ourselves that we can only show all the good that's happening, right? But if and when we can actually open ourselves up and back to vulnerability and have those courageous conversations of what's really hard, like the mistakes that I've made, that allows people to actually, one of my friends describes it as I stood naked and exposed for the entire world to judge me.
Yep.
I let them.
Yep.
And it's really, really hard to do, right? Because it's easy to pass judgment on others,
It
right? But when
is.
we're
But
faced with the
people,
reality,
you gave everyone an opportunity to hear from you, to hear exactly what was going on. And by taking away the need for gossip and the shock and awe of it all, you gave them an opportunity to share their heart. And that, I think, just shows how beautiful humanity can be. So thank you for sharing that. So switching
Yeah.
gears a little bit, what inspires you?
Oh gosh, my kids. Um, my kids have just gone through so much, right?
Yeah.
And every day, like just watching them grow and evolve and find their place in the world really inspires me.
Mm,
My parents, so my parents have had a journey,
I
right?
bet.
Like not only obviously I've gone through what I've gone through, but my sister passed away 5 years ago, and they are the most kind-hearted, selfless, spiritual people.
Mm,
And I'm lucky enough that I get to live with them now. I learn something from them every single day.
beautiful.
They have taught me to never take no for an answer. And when the no comes, not to take it personally, but
Yeah.
just try again later. They've taught me to believe in myself in a way that I think is a unique perspective of having gone through what I've gone through, like just knowing that my parents unconditionally love me and support me.
It's amazing.
I'm going to tell you, like my parents still have to financially support me in many ways, and that's very hard for me as I rebuild
Yeah.
my life. Um, but they've never lost faith in me, and
Mm,
so that's been really special. And then so I read a lot. There's a lot of people that I follow, that I'm inspired by, um, that I listen to, whether it's for my business,
mhm.
whether it's for my spiritual growth, whether it's for my fitness. I'm a fitness freak. So, like in my fitness world, there's other people that inspire me. So, I would say in various aspects of my
Yeah.
life, I have different people that I look to.
And what would you like your legacy to be?
It's interesting because actually, my last question now in my speech is all about legacy.
Mm,
I believe my legacy is this, that I am helping others recognize that no matter what struggle we face, we can rise through it. And that there is not one, every single one of us has the power to embrace, let go, and then dare to make this
mhm.
a bold move, which is the third step I never got to. But and we can we convince ourselves that we can't. We convince ourselves that we've got to, other people are going to look down on us, or other people are going to, we want to compare ourselves to others. But we all have the power and strength. And I believe that's going to be my legacy, is helping others understand
Love that.
that man, woman, young, old, no matter what race or gender or culture you come from, you can rise through it no matter
Yes,
what.
I agree with that. And what's next for you?
So this year, 2025, I'm focused on finally getting my book out. So I've been working on my book since 2020. And I actually just yesterday decided which publisher I'm going to go with. So I am looking to publish my book this year. I am focused on really doubling down on my YouTube videos. I'm writing a lot for some publications. So I'm doing a lot of sort of writing. I already have a journal done, and journaling was a big part of my experience when I was in prison. And so I plan on putting out a journal that'll be a real takeaway for all my audiences. I'm excited about that. And what else? Yeah, those are the
Lots of
biggest things. A
keynotes.
podcast. Oh, actually, the biggest thing that's happening, well, one of the biggest things that's happening is there's been a documentary series in the works since 2020 with a big documentary producer. And that video is already, a lot of videos already been cut. Not the video of the content, but some of the video. Anyway, the sizzle's being cut now. And
Nice.
I think it's like on the 10th iteration, and he's about to start selling that. So I'm excited.
Wow. Well, good luck with that. That's amazing. And
Yeah.
how can people find you?
So you can find me everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Rashmi Airan. I'm sure you'll put it in the
We will
post.
share it all. Yeah.
LinkedIn, Instagram is also Rashmi Airan. Facebook, I think, is like Rashmi Airan Speaker. TikTok is Rashmi Airan. And I don't really do X or Twitter anymore.
Me neither.
Um, Instagram, yeah, LinkedIn. And my
Got it.
email is rashmi@rashmiairan.com. My website is rashmiairan.com. Everything is my name. Just look up my name. You'll
Easy.
find
Easy.
it.
Well, Rashmi, thank you for sharing your story. And it is so good for people to hear how to come back from the unthinkable. And You've just done a great job. So I congratulate you on all of your success and wish you the best 2025. And guys, if you like the story and you like what you heard, please go subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a 5-star review at Apple or Spotify. Those are so meaningful. It helps me to continue the show. Thank you all for listening. Happy New Year and have a great day. Go lead with heart. Are you ready to elevate your leadership style and create an exceptional workplace that stands out from the crowd? I'm here to introduce you to a game-changing resource that will transform the way you lead and shape your company culture. It's time to embrace the power of top-down culture. This practical guide empowers your leadership for lasting success, helping you create a workplace where everyone thrives. Get top-down culture today, and let's reshape the future of leadership together. Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.